With the Ninja Turtles coming out of their shells to join the DC heroes of Injustice 2, let's go back to the 90s for a look at their first time in fighting games. It was a valiant idea, Konami. Really. You could have just created the same Tournament Fighters experience for each of its 3 available platforms and called it a day. But you went and made unique, very different fighting games for the Super NES, Genesis, and NES, released between late 1993 and early 1994. Right alongside all the other wannabe Street Fighter IIs and Mortal Kombats. And kids everywhere starting to replace their cries of Cowabunga! With time! These 3 fighting games represent the last time that Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael would be playable on consoles for nearly a decade. But how do these 3 unique versions of Tournament Fighters actually differ? And which excel above the others in key areas? Let's take a look. 3 unique versions of Tournament Fighters, 4 never-before-told TMNT stories. On Super NES, it's 2 poorly constructed narratives for the price of 1. Do you like Tournament Mode's idea of the Turtles simply competing in a tournament to show Splinter that they actually know their stuff? You shouldn't, it's really out of character. Or is Story Mode's globe-trotting trail of one-on-one fisticuffs to save Splinter and April more your style? On the Genesis, it's Turtles in Space! The Turtles and a few friends hop aboard that old spaceship they just happen to have lying around and explore the universe, planet by planet, to save Master Splinter from Krang and the evil turtle clones who abducted him. Things are a lot more local on the NES, which never leaves New York City. Shredder's all like, "Hey, Turtles, let's have a fighting tournament. We'll randomly invite Casey Jones and some dude named Hothead. No big whoop. Could be fun." Okay, maybe that's not a direct quote, but it's not too far off from the vibe of the whole thing. So when none of your options make much sense, it's really tough to pick a winner when it comes to premise. Do the Super NES's 2 crappy premises prevail over the Genesis and NES only having 1 crappy story? To keep things simple, yeah, let's just say yes. Now, the last thing I am as a gamer is an expert in fighting games. I love playing them, but I am terrible at them as well. That said, it's hard for me to name the winner of this category, but I can definitely tell you the loser. The NES version's gameplay suffers the most, not only from having only 2 buttons to work with, but does anyone really want to play as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles without their signature weapons? That's right, 4 of the 7 playable characters in this game are weaponless turtles. And once you master this move from Raphael, pretty easy. But I guess I need to declare a winner between Super Nintendo and Genesis when it comes to gameplay, huh? Seeing as how the Genesis version absolutely destroys me whenever I try to play it. Shock. Cowabunga. I gotta give this one to the Super NES. All 3 versions of Tournament Fighters come with very distinct themes, each varying greatly in miles traveled per destination. For Super NES, the worldwide approach takes us everywhere from faraway places like Mount Olympus, the pirate ship, and the Japanese No stage, to closer to home locales like the back alley, the cafeteria, and April's workplace, Studio 6. There's even a Thunderdome, complete with a female punk rocker with Tina Turner big hair, singing what we can only assume must be her big hit, "We Don't Need Another Hero in a Half Shell." On the Genesis, it's entirely possible you'll never find a fighting game with less imaginatively named locations, most of which you can tackle in any order. So where will you seek your first victory? Ice Planet or Jungle Planet? Bioplanet? Or Ancient Planet? Ocean Planet? Or Magma Ocean Planet? And is Mirage Planet a nod to the Turtles' original comics publisher, Mirage Comics? It'd be nice to hand Konami some credit here, but that seems a generous assumption based on how lazy they were with everything else. They could have just as easily mistyped the placement of the copyright data into that spot. At least we get to fight Krang in the Technodrome.
Cowabunga!
And finally, the simplest console yields the simplest set of environments, never leaving Manhattan. There's a certain charm to only including the sewers, a bar, and a skyline setting, but that sure doesn't amount to many different places to fight. So let's go ahead and give the best battle arenas to Super NES. Though the intergalactic feel of the Sega Genesis adds an epic flavor to everything, the Super NES takes us to the ends of our own Earth with themed locations we can all relate to. Two versions of Tournament Fighters feature playable characters you care about whom you won't find in the other two. It's enough to have you asking, why isn't that character in my version? A very fair question indeed. On the Super NES, you may remember the Rat King from the TMNT cartoon as the villain whose episode you never wanted to catch the rerun of. The dreams you never had of playing as him are finally realized on Super NES. More desirable, at least now more than 2 decades of TMNT fiction later, is Karai. And she's a character you would have only known at the time if you were a reader of the Mirage Black and White comics. Though modern TMNT fans know Karai as Shredder's adopted daughter, her initial creation by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird suggested no such relation. She was merely a successor. At the same time, however, Karai has a child of her own, and it's through her death that the Turtles agree to help Karai defeat, and by defeat I mean kill, a spin-off clan known as the Foot Elite. So, of course, she leads her own spin-off clan called the Shredder Elite in this game. Over on Sega Genesis, in my book, Wrong, Retro Games You Messed Up Our Comic Book Heroes, I identified April O'Neil as the Princess Peach of retro superhero games, getting abducted in one game after another. So kudos to Genesis Tournament Fighters for letting April do something in a game other than get captured. But can we take a minute to just talk about her look? Over the years, we've seen April's look vary greatly, beginning with a rather stark difference between Mirage Comics' dark-haired antique shop owner to the cartoon's auburn-haired ace reporter in an iconic yellow jumpsuit, which you also see in the Super NES version of Tournament Fighters and pretty much every other 90s TMNT game. But Konami, what happened here? Did your art guy just get back from a screening of that hot new movie, Terminator 2? Or maybe he had a thing for Blaze from Streets of Rage? Is there a single person in the world who would identify this as April outside of the context of a TMNT game? Her costume looks straight out of a rejected sequel to Flashdance. And why not even bother with at least a hint of yellow in there? Would it somehow interfere with her inexplicably amazing new turtle-level ninja skills? Anyway, again, it's cool to have April in there no matter how off-model she may be. Better yet, she gets to hang out with her boyfriend, Casey Jones, who seems to be buying his masks now from the same place as Vega from Street Fighter 2. But unlike April, Casey is not a character you've heard of who's exclusive to the Genesis. He's also in the NES version, worth mentioning because this system has 0 recognizable exclusives that you've heard of. With all this, it seems pretty obvious that the edge goes to the Genesis. Karai is awesome, but let's give the Genesis version some credit for including the franchise's most popular female character in a role outside of the variety.
Oh, yeah.
You want a nice array of TMNT characters you've probably never heard of? Play the Super NES version. Hailing from Archie Comics' Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles adventures, War portrays the biblical horseman of the apocalypse in the form of a blue rock monster, while Armagon essentially answers the question of what would happen to Jaws if he were exposed to mutagen. batty in more ways than one, Wingnut originated in comics associated with Ralston Purina's TMNT serial before graduating to Archie Comics and eventually the cartoon, which also introduced us to Shredder's super robot named Chrome Dome. Finally, the female ninja Asuka was created just for the game, though some pretty sensible rumors strongly suggest that she started out as the ancient Japanese character Mitsu from the third TMNT movie, which nobody liked. One actual fact about her though, the US and Japanese versions of her were different. Over on the Genesis, Ray Fillet was originally known as Man Ray in TMNT Adventures No. 5, and he may be the most popular TMNT character never to have been depicted in the cartoon. That honor certainly does not go to Sisyphus, a mutant scarab who's named for a type of dung beetle, which is still a step up from sounding like a venereal disease, I guess. And even with only 7 characters, the NES still managed to get one you've never heard of. Though Hothead certainly can fight as a man-sized dragon that we see in the game, TMNT Adventures No. 28 illustrates his ability to grow to Godzilla proportions. Good thing he's a good guy. In his human form, he even had a fling with April for a bit. And you know what? I like this guy. Let's throw the NES version a bone and give it the win for this round. So which of these games has the best ending? On Super Nintendo, the tournament mode includes a fun ending for each combatant, like Michelangelo going on vacation, or Chrome Dome changing his evil programming to good and even getting a Robo-Mate. You're also declared King of Kings. Meanwhile, once you defeat Karai in story mode, Splinter's remarks are minimal on Celebration and maximum on Buzzkill. And that's not the last we've heard of Karai. Over on Genesis, it turns out that the Turtles never needed to leave Earth in their great space coaster because, hey, huge out-of-nowhere plot twist, they just needed to go to Japan, where Karai is. Or, as kids back then would say when they got to her, "Who's this? Where's Shredder?" Seriously, Shredder's not even in this game. He is in the NES version, however, where the turtle of your choice defeats him, and then we get this cutscene where it's like, "Shredder, this better not be one of your lousy tricks," and we're totally thinking it might be, because remember, this is just like a friendly tournament Shredder setup, but then Shredder's all, "You haven't seen the last of me," so apparently it was just a regular tournament with no real nefarious ulterior motive or anything. So then Shredder runs away like a punk, and your turtle apparently really needs to use the restroom, and then Splinter comes in on some kind of teleportation bubble thing that doesn't really make any sense, and he's just there all of a sudden, and he's all, "Celebrate good times, come on." But all things considered, I'd have to give best ending to Super Nintendo. Not for the story mode's ending, that's bad. But you do feel some degree of payoff in an I just beat Goro kind of way, seeing the individualized endings of the tournament mode. In case it's not incredibly obvious, the Super NES version of Tournament Fighters prevails over the other two, unless you're talking current market value. As you may have seen in a video about expensive superhero games last summer that I did, the NES version ranks among the system's most expensive aftermarket titles out there, period. Let's kick down. And here's where everyone loses. It's somewhat unfathomable that the Genesis version has no Shredder, and that Casey Jones missed the train to the Super NES. But several other hugely popular characters completely sat out playability in all 3 versions. On the lower end of the spectrum, fan favorites like Metalhead, Slash, and Leatherhead deserve recognition for being totally snubbed over obscurities like Hothead and Sisyphus. None of the boss characters in the Genesis version are playable, most notably Krang, who's totally absent from the other 2 versions completely. Hardcore comic fans would have also appreciated the ability to play as the Triceraton, who's actually a species, not an individual, but hey. And why must we always be rescuing Splinter? He should be playable. There are even a few classic characters we only see in the background of the Super NES version. Baxter Stockman, Bebop, and Rocksteady. I want to play as all those guys. I think Bebop's unenthused pose right there speaks for us all in that regard. Well, maybe if the Turtles prove popular enough in Injustice 2, these injustices can be atoned for in a Tournament Fighters sequel that no one's ever really asked for. But I want it. If you like this video, please follow Spider-Ham's advice. Also, I actually wrote this for Wrong Retro Games You Messed Up Our Comic Book Heroes Volume 2, hopefully coming later this year. In the meantime, you can pick up the original for just $2.99 on Kindle. More Spider-Man next time, guys.